Hey, Bible students, I've got a question for you. And the question relates to this man that you can see on your screen. It's one of the most popular faces in the world. Uh, Maybe not so well liked, but certainly it's very popular. You know who it is. I'd like to ask you a question. Does this man have hooks in his jaws? That's our question that we want to deal with this session. Does this Russian leader have hooks in his jaws? Well, why should anyone who is a Bible student think that he has hooks in his jaws? Well, just hold on. You see, if you go back into the Bible, you will read about the Assyrians. The Assyrians were a very cruel people, as is depicted by this picture that they themselves would have drawn as a relief on the walls of their temples, etc. And you can see the man who is the king has a spear, which he's ready to put out the eyes of a captive, but he also has a rope, and the rope is attached to a ring or some kind of a hook that's either in the jaws, in the nose, or in the lips of the captive. Pretty cruel? Certainly cruel. But he had them captives. They wouldn't be walking away, and he would be able to control everything they did by what he had. Now, notice the way that the Word of God picks this up. Because, see, this is the way that the people of Assyria would have carried away the captives from Judah, particularly from Israel. And they would have known, certainly those who were left and those who went, how cruel this was. Well, if you look at it from the way the Bible picks it up and talks about it, notice this passage. Isaiah 37, verse 29. This is speaking to the king, Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Because your rage against me and your tumult has come up into my ears, therefore I will put my hook in your nose and my bridle in your lips, and I will turn you back by the way which you came. So what God is saying to this man is, you remember how you have taken captives and how cruelly you have treated them. Well, I am going to take you captive, and you're not going to turn to the right or the left to do what I say. And if you know the history of the event, there were 185,000 men around the walls of Jerusalem, willing and ready to take that city. But that night, they never got through it. In the morning, they were all dead corpses. And this king, who was spared, had to go back home, defrocked, and certainly humiliated by what had happened. But he was captive. He couldn't do anything he wanted after this event. Now, you have to know that, you see, to understand what God later does and says concerning this. Because in Ezekiel chapter 38, you can read there in verses 1 and 2, now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. So this is an interesting prophecy, because many people today, looking at this probably with new eyes because of what's happening in Russia, can see that what's meant here is Russia, the prince of Russia, Moscow, and Tobolsk, if you like. So it's certainly referring to Russia. And God is giving us this prophecy. Well, what would have been the use of that prophecy at the time that Ezekiel wrote it? Wouldn't have been much use, because it was for a time much later on. And Bible students have been watching this throughout those ages, I'm sure, to see when this was going to come to pass. And there were Russian leaders who they thought was the man that was being mentioned. But this man, Putin, could very well be the man. We can't be certain of it, but look what it goes on to say. You see in Ezekiel 38, verse 3, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks into your jaws, and lead you out. Now, you see, that's one of the few other references we find in the Bible of this idea of hooks in your jaws. But Bible students being what they are, they will know that, hey, that's being referred to before. It referred to the king of Assyria, and God took him captive. So here's an aspect which a lot of people are missing today when they think about Russia, because they don't know their Bible. The Bible is saying there will be a Russian leader who God will put hooks in his jaws, as he did to the ancient Assyrian. Now, what time period would it happen? Well, this is an interesting thing too, because you see it's so exciting that other people who thought the Russian leader of their day was the one didn't see this, which just comes a few verses later in Ezekiel 38. After many days you will be visited. In the latter years you will come into the land of those brought back from the sword and gathered out of many people on the mountains of Israel. So yes, we see a lot of destruction. There's a lot of things which certainly bring us to tears to see what's happening in Ukraine. But this man is on a trip. If he has got hooks in his jaws, if God's leading him on this route of prophecy, because he's going to Israel. Now that's opening up a lot more to people to see what will happen here. But you can't at the same time miss other quotations that the Bible uses to describe this event. For instance, it says in the prophecy of Joel, wake up the mighty men, prepare for war. So let's read it exactly. In Joel 3, verse 9, it says, proclaim you this among the nations, prepare for war. Wake up the mighty men, beat your plowshares into swords, your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Well, United Nations, if you've ever been to New York and you've seen what's inscribed on the walls, they take the Isaiah account of that verse 10, which is the very reverse, which will happen afterwards. That's when they will take their weapons of war and beat them into agricultural implements. But this time is taking what would otherwise go to agricultural and converting it into weapons of war. And isn't it interesting, Bible students, of what we're seeing in Europe, of how nations in Europe are waking up, and they're starting to prepare for war like they've never done before. And yet, who's preparing for war like this except Russia, who is prepared for war? Waking up the mighty men. Well, they have been preparing with these huge nuclear weapons, waiting for the opportunity, if it need be, to use them. And so people have been backing off from Russia because they're afraid that if they ever got into World War III, that it's a nuclear war. That's the advantage of a Bible student. You can see the whole picture there. What people see in the world is just a little bit, even though they might not even recognize it as coming from the scripture. So we want to leave this session by just mentioning again, does this Russian leader have hooks in his jaws? And it makes you think biblical terms. You will go back to the Bible, you'll read it again. You will try to see if in fact you can see other aspects of this invasion to get to know more about it. And that's the purpose of these videos. We will not be dealing with the overall picture. We'll be dealing with little pieces of it to try to give you a better understanding of why the Bible knows what's going to happen. All we need to do is read it and believe it. And if we believe the gospel message and are baptized, we will be saved. Thank you.